the Hollywood Beat Book Club. I'm Tandy Culpepper,
And I'm Pamela Skjolsvik.
and we are talking today about a book called James by the author Percival Everett. But before we get to that, we need to tell people how you and I know each other. And that was meeting in the Master of Fine Arts program in Creative Nonfiction at Goucher College. Shout out Gophers.
Go first.
But you went back to school after that.
I did because I realized that I was not going to be the next great American novelist.
Hold
And
on. You have written a novel and it has gotten attention from important people. So it's called Forever 51, and it is about what?
it is about an eternally menopausal vampire on a quest to become mortal again.
And what's not to love about that?
There's not, I mean, who wouldn't love that? I mean, menopausal vampires, it's so now. I
And
mean,
as
come on.
any woman of a certain age will tell you, sometimes you feel like being a vampire at that age, right?
Well, yeah, it makes you quite bitchy. So she's not a sexy, like, ooh, vampire. She's just a grumpy, middle-aged vampire, really mad that she has been stuck at this most undesirable age.
And I don't know how you came up with that idea, but you did.
I did.
So you went back to school.
hmm Yes, I decided, well, my husband and I moved back well, we moved to Texas in 2010. I'd just gotten my MFA from Goucher, so I thought the world was going to open. Well, it did not, and I couldn't get a job. So, but I landed a job doing some work for a private collection. And that kind of led me into, well, I worked with rare books, and then I decided that, well, I want to go to school to learn more about this. And so I decided to get my MLS from the University of North Texas, and I got a job at a public library and decided I loved that way more than working with rare books. Um, and it gels with who I am because I love books, their importance, and I love that, libraries aren't just about books. They're about, giving people access to information, any kinds of information. It can be just a place to go and hang out,
And
to
you
see
run
people.
a book club through
I
your,
do. I just started at my most recent job in November, and so I came from Fort Worth Public Library and I was heavy programming. So I did a lot of programs at Fort Worth Public Library. And I decided, I work in a smaller library and, I love book clubs. I love to talk books. So, um, yes, I started a book club at this new library and I get to purchase books, and that's exciting and fun
but it
because,
sounds like you have the perfect job for people who like to read.
yeah, I feel so grateful for my job, because um, I get to be in an environment all day long that I absolutely love, and the library that I work at is absolutely beautiful. It's just a joy to go to work. So,
When I was a child living in Germany, when my father was posted there, um, we only had television in German. And so, not speaking German, it was um, a bummer. But then I discovered the library that was on the post there. And I could get a library card even at the age of 6 or 7. And I could go over there and I could check out 3 to 5 books, I think, at a time, bring them back, read them cover to cover, take them back, and do it all over again. So that's how I um, became a lover of the written word because I couldn't watch television at night, so I read. I mean, I could watch television at night because Lassie barks in the same language the world over. But that limits how much you're doing. So your book club is how you came upon the book James, the novel James, that we're going to discuss in a moment.
Well, it wasn't how I discovered it. It was James was the National Book Award winner this year.
Oh,
So I wanted to read it. It was, everyone was putting holds on it. So I'm like, oh, I need to read this. And then I decided this would be a really great book for a discussion in a book club. So it's going to be our April pick.
and it is our pick today. But
Yes.
before we get to that, we're going to talk about what we're reading. What are you reading right now?
Well, I'm always reading, and I'm one of those people who likes to read several books at a time. Like I may be listening to a
Me
book,
too.
maybe
Same here.
I have a book on my nightstand, so I usually have a couple going at once. But I'll just talk about a few of the books that I've read recently that I've liked because, we don't always like books that we've read. Um, so this one was the first pick for the book club, which is Olympus, Texas by Stacey Swan. It was also the Good Morning America book club pick.
No
And
kidding.
yeah,
Good
and
for Stacy.
yes, and I asked, she's a Texas author, and I asked if she would zoom in for the discussion, and
How did you find her?
I just on our website. So I just went to our website, sent her, a contact. She had contact, so I sent her an email and said, I'm a librarian. We have a book club. Would you be willing to zoom in for 30 minutes? And she was like, of course. I mean, that's a smart author because, especially with a debut author, because I mean, libraries are your biggest, because if you can get a librarian to read and recommend your book,
Exactly.
the reach is a lot bigger. And
And didn't
plus,
you do something similar during the pandemic?
I did. Well, I had some selfish reasons because I was a debut novelist during the pandemic. But, you know, starting in March of 2020, all the book events had been canceled because, we weren't gathering in
No book
public
tours
places.
then.
So no book tours, no book talks, nothing. So I started the 2020 Quarantine Book Club, and it was all about debut authors. So I interviewed with a co-host, Susan. Debut novelists, and we talked about their books, and it was really fun. It's really fun to talk to an author and pick
Pick
their
their
brain
brain.
about, what made you want to write this book? Where'd you get the idea? How long did it take you? I'm just amazed at people who can just write a book in a year. I just,
Yeah, no,
I just,
that blows my mind. Blows my mind. So
but
what
there are
else?
people who can do it.
Yeah, what else are you reading?
I read also, which was up for a National Book Award, was All Fours by Miranda July.
Oh,
Uh,
Miranda July. Yeah, I'm familiar
yes.
with her.
She's a artist, actress, and this book was really, really interesting. I liked it as an older woman, and it's about a woman's midlife kind of awakening.
Is it
She's
fiction or nonfiction?
It's fiction. In the book, the main character is supposed to go on a road trip from LA to New York, kind of this solo journey, hook up with friends along the way. But instead, she goes 30 miles away from home, checks into a motel, and she develops a relationship with a younger man, but it's just very, just, it's Miranda July is an interesting woman, and I really enjoyed it. It's about desire and connection, and
And
I
who
think
can't identify with all of those?
exactly. So I really enjoyed that one. What else? Oh, I read Grady Hendrix's Witchcraft for Wayward Girls, which is a
Novel?
horror. Yep, horror novel. Takes place in 1970, the year I was born, and in Florida.
The year I graduated from high school.
Well, that was the year I was born, and it takes place at like a home for girls who are pregnant. So if you're a pregnant teen, you'd go to these homes. So, you'd be away from everybody so no one could see that you were, going to have a baby.
Yeah,
And
I was dating women, or I should say girls at that time, and if it were not for just the sheer luck of the draw, I would have wound up with a with progeny at one of those places. So, um, in for a penny, in for a pound, and what else?
let's see. Some books that I just finished a romance, which is totally not my genre, but somebody I work with just said they really loved it, and the premise kind of grabbed me. I had sort of my first book was about death and death professions, and this book is called The Dead Romantics, and it was a debut novel, romance novel, and it's about a ghostwriter for a very popular romance novelist who falls in love with a ghost.
You're a different kind of ghost story.
Yes. I really liked it. I listened to that. It was light and it was a good driving book, Not super deep, but enjoyable. What else have I read that I loved? I love None of This Is True by Lisa Jewell, which is a thriller. I'd never read anything by Lisa Jewell before. And it's about two women who are it takes place in England. They're at a restaurant and they're both celebrating their 40th birthdays. One is just with her husband, who's much older than her, and the other is a very popular podcaster. And they discover that they were born same day, same year at the same hospital. And their lives will never be the same after they have um, they become friends. And then
Dun 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 dun.
dun, dun, dun. And I was that if you like audiobooks, that was a really great book. The production on it was wonderful, and it had like a cast of characters, and I really liked that one. And then another GMA pick. Some of these I have three GMA picks, so I think I might like Good Morning America picks. But Frozen River by Ariel Lawhon, which is about a midwife in the late 1700s who solves a murder.
Wow,
And
that's
it's
someone with
based,
a busy, uh, it's busy enough being a midwife. You have your hands in two different genres, so
yeah,
to speak.
but it's based on a real woman and her diary.
Oh,
So, I mean, it's a fictionalized account. It's historical fiction, but it's actually based on a real woman and her diary. So that was a really interesting read.
I can imagine.
Yes. So those are a few of the things I've read. How about you, Tandy? What have you read?
Well, I could not wait. I kept seeing the trailer for this movie, which coincidentally just won the Best Ensemble Award at the SAG-AFTRA Awards. We should mention that we're doing this the day after the SAG-AFTRA Awards and a week before the Academy Awards or the Oscars.
Mhm.
This picture has been in every Best Picture category mentioned. That's Conclave, about a novel about the selection of the next pope after the unexpected death of the sitting pontiff. And the book was written by a man named Robert Harris. So I thought I really enjoyed these. What else has he written? Turns out he wrote a book called V2. They're all historical um, fiction um, novels. Um, V2 about the long range um, rocket that the Nazis fired upon London during the closing days of World War II. And it's based on fact. Then there's a book he wrote called Munich, which is based on Neville Chamberlain going to Munich to meet with Herr Hitler. He always calls him Herr Hitler when Chamberlain is welcomed as a hero to achieve peace of our time. And the word appeasement came from that meeting. And then I'm reading one of his now called Precipice about the Prime Minister Asquith right before World War I breaks out. So all of this stuff is grounded in fact, but he, fills in all the details around it with his imagination. Two other books that I read prior to seeing the limited series that came out from them. The first is Masters of the Air by Donald L. Miller. And the book was 750 pages long. Took me forever to get through it. I was reading it before I realized that there was a limited series based on it, adapted from it, I should say. And then another one called Capote's Women, which the Capote versus the Swans was adapted from by an author named Lawrence Leamer, and I was able to interview both Donald L. Miller, who wrote Masters of the Air, and Lawrence Leamer, who wrote Capote's Women. So on the same website, people will be able to find those interviews. So that moves us along to James. What was your initial overall impression of the book after you finished reading it?
Well, I really enjoyed it for one, but it made me want to reread The Adventures of Huckleberry Finn because I can't even remember when I first read that. And I'm like, how much did he veer off from the original material, because it's a retelling from the perspective of Jim. Um, but I really enjoyed it. I mean, it I don't know, just the whole thing with language and how, James is this very educated man, but he, in front of white people, he puts on the whole, you know,
Shuck and jive.
yeah, and I was like, that's brilliant.
Well, the first thing that got me was the title, because it's a formal uh, re renaming of Jim. A lot of people. Well, you go by Pamela, not Pam, and he prefers to be called um, James. Uh, why don't we each read a passage from the book? Set yours up.
Um, Tandy, the pressure. Well, it's pretty self-explanatory, but it takes place where James is explaining, why he needs to speak in this manner and why it's a good thing.
Oh, right.
Okay, so he says, okay, what if they don't understand? Lizzie asked. That's okay. Let them work to understand you. Mumble sometimes so they can have the satisfaction of telling you not to mumble. They enjoy the correction and thinking you're stupid. Remember, the more they choose to not want to listen, the more we can say to one another around them. Why did God set it up like this? Rachel asked. With them as masters and us as slaves. There is no God, child. There's religion, but there's no God of theirs. Their religion tells that we will get our reward in the end. However, it apparently doesn't say anything about their punishment. But when we're around them, we believe in God. Oh, Lottie Lord, we be believing. Religion is just a controlling tool they employ and adhere to when convenient. There must be something, Virgil said. I'm sorry, Virgil, you might be right. There might be some higher power, children, but it's not their white God. However, the more you talk about God and Jesus and heaven and hell, the better they feel. The children said together, and the better they feel, the safer we are. February, translate that. The mo better they feels, the mo safer we be. Nice.
Yes. Yes. That's called code switching. And Kamala Harris did that a couple of times. You better think a union or thank a union. You better thank a union, for all the benefits that the middle class got. And people said she was trying to talk, all Southern and whatever. And no, she was code switching. And uh, that is what uh, African Americans do. Many of them, when they're around each other, which is not the case in this book, but when they're around each other, they speak in a certain way that they wouldn't speak when they're around, say, largely Caucasian groups, because we'd be too dumb to tell the difference. Um, his chapters, Percival Everett's chapters in James are rather short. So I'm going to read chapter 12, which is the last chapter in the book. As it happens with the frightened and unprepared, we scattered. Some of us would be caught, some of us would be killed, probably some of us would go crawling back. Sadie, Lizzie, and I made it north, Sadie being his wife, Lizzie his daughter, to a town we were told was in Iowa. The white people didn't seem happy to see us, but there was a war on. It had something to do with us. The local sheriff met us in the street and regarded us suspiciously. Runaways, he asked. We are, I said. Any of you named N-word Jim? I pointed to each of us. Sadie, Lizzie, Morris, Buck. Morris and Buck were two people they picked up along the way. And who are you? I am James. James what? Just James. I love that. That was powerful. That said two things to me. Um, when Muhammad Ali, who is Cassius Clay, decided to change his name to Muhammad Ali, he referred to Cassius Clay as his slave name. And a lot of, the actress Gabrielle Union, I was interviewing her and I said, Union was such an unusual last name. And she said, well, after the Civil War, one of her forebears decided that that would be his last name because the Union is, soldiers are what uh, he uh, acknowledged were the people that gave him his freedom. So he took the last name Union, which I thought was very powerful. So the language, the code switching, um, and the fact that when James was asleep and he was talking in his sleep,
To
huh?
Voltaire.
Huh?
To Voltaire.
To Voltaire. And and yeah, James has read Voltaire, um, and a couple of other authors who I can't Locke. Um, but Huck says you were talking all funny, and um, I just thought that was so interesting. Uh, you don't have to you don't have to have read The Adventures of Huck or just Adventures of Huckleberry Finn to appreciate James as a standalone novel, do you?
No, I don't think so.
I certainly don't think so either. And there's something in there that James says, white people love feeling guilty. And I didn't quite understand that. Did you could you understand?
What page are we talking
Oh,
about
good
again?
grief. And I'm reading it on the Kindle Fire. I have no idea
There's
what
no
page.
page numbers on your Kindle Fire?
There are page numbers, but I make the print large enough so that I can see it, which is okay. Commercial here for Kindle Fires. If you have vision problems and you want to make the print larger, you can do that, and you can change the font to one that you prefer, which is uh, really cool. Um, no, I have no idea. But the fact is that James is kind of his own superhero in this um, in this book, this retelling. Um, there's the capricious nature of white men around black men. Um, James not only can read, but he can write. And he asks somebody in this household if he'll get him a pencil. And the pencil winds up getting the guy lynched.
Mm-hmm.
I had not read any of Percival Everett's books, and he is a prolific writer. James is his 24th book I read. He wrote, which I think a lot of people will be familiar with, even if they haven't read it. He wrote a book called Erasure, and that book was adapted into a movie called American Fiction, which was
Mm.
nominated for
Best
Best
picture and best
Picture.
screenplay, I
Yes,
think.
last year, and it had a similar um, conceit because Jeffrey Wright's character is told to go back and make his um, novel more black. So he goes back and changes, he translates it into Black English to satisfy um, the white people. I'm shocked by this. He was given a $500,000 advance for James, which,
Nice. Nice.
yeah, right.
Good on Percival Everett.
No kidding. I mean, that's amazing. That to me is amazing. Do you have anything else about James that you'd like to offer?
No, just that I've been listening now to The Adventures of Huckleberry Finn, listening to it, and it is just so hard for me to hear it. I mean, I am totally against like taking out the N word because it was, Mark Twain. This is,
Well, it
how
was
the book was
written
written.
in 1884 or 1888, sometime around then, and it would have been uh, part and parcel of its times because listen, I'm from Birmingham, Alabama, and in the 50s and 60s, I heard that word constantly.
Okay, well, I was born in Fargo, North Dakota, and I remember the first time I heard that word, I was 19, and I was so shocked that I was like, to me, it's like it is it like it I it's a bad it is a bad word, and so listening to the book, it's I know it and it's just in it's just in the book, and it just, I'm like, oh my gosh. But um, I think I think it should be read together. I think that I mean, there are some things that are similar in it, and there's some things that are quite different.
It was used 219 times, according to an article I read.
It was what?
It was used 219 times in the novel, according to an article I read. 200,
Jane's
yes.
or oh,
Actually, I'm not sure on that. One of them, either in Huckleberry Finn or in James, 219 times. I'm going to wager it was Huckleberry Finn.
I'm gonna say it was probably Huckleberry Finn because
Yes.
it's I mean, like I'm driving down the road and I'm like listening to this and I'm like, oh my God, I hope nobody's like can hear.
Yeah. Yeah.
So maybe that white guilt. It's like I'm listening to this, I'm like, oh my God, I can't believe, but
There was a discussion on The View, and Whoopi Goldberg was talking to somebody else on The View, and it might have been one of their guests. I I have no memory of who it was, but the word is used either with the uh, uh, GA final syllable, ga, um, and the person said, well, it's in music and it's in literature, so why can't we use it? And she said, you can't, I can't, you can't, just don't. And I feel the same uh, way about the word faggot. I'm gay, I can use it, other fags can use it. You don't. Because when we use it, it's one thing. But when somebody else uses it, it becomes a rank pejorative, which is the same thing I think about the N word.
yeah.
But in the time that Twain or Samuel Clemens was active in his writing, it was part and parcel of the way people spoke back then. And it was before, way before Jim Crow and all the lynchings that followed that. It was a terrible time in um, American history. And, they call it the original sin. Slavery is the original sin. The concept of somebody owning another person is so abhorrent.
Well, that's why this book should be read because that's how I believe that we all get to look at lives that are not our own by reading them in a work of fiction or in nonfiction. You know, it creates empathy. And I think what we really need now, more than probably anything, is a little bit of empathy and the ability to look at lives that are not like our own.
And
And
that has nothing whatsoever to do with diversity, equity, or inclusion, except that it is empathy. And you need to understand the voices and hear the voices of people all around you.
exactly.
All right. Well, I'm Tandy Culpepper,
And I'm Pamela Skjolsvik.
and thank you for joining us here as the Hollywood Beat looks at books and authors.